Hello once again, this is Eric with Master Tool Repair. Today we have a K-pump rebuild kit, or valve kit. This is our Emglo K-pump here. This is our valve kit, and it's just a short instructional video how to replace the spring actuated disc valves in the K model pump. It's a twin cylinder model pump. I've already taken the cylinder, valve plate and head off of the crankcase just for the demonstration to make it simple. Took the head bolts out already. And over here on the left side we have our parts. We have the cylinder gasket that will come in the kit. We have our head gasket. We have the K145 intake valves up here and the K146 exhaust valves. And here we're going to just go ahead and remove the head. We already have the head bolts removed. And we have our intake side over here. I have the intake filter on to show which side is intake, which side is exhaust. You also notice on the pump head, you should have directional arrow which side we're pointing to the exhaust, essentially. So the arrow points this way, the exhaust, and is obviously on the right side of the head. So that's a good little hint there. Alright, remove the head, place it to the side. Here we have our valve plate. Two valves on each side. On the left side, of course, on the intake side, we have our intake filters. And flip it over, on the right side we have our exhaust valves. Okay, so easy way to tell which valves are intake and which valves are exhaust. Our K145 intake valves have smaller springs. You can see they're thinner springs, not a lot of tension. That's your intake valve on your filter side. Of course, our exhaust valve has our thicker spring, obviously thicker and with more tension. So that's kind of an easy way to identify the two. Alright, so what you need as far as tools to remove the valves, simple enough, just a C-clip kind of a tool here. You know, this will, because they are held in by C-clips that are kind of spring actuated. So you see the two little eyelets there in the C-clip. We're just going to simply take those out. Pretty simple, but you might have some resistance or might be a bit difficult to remove if you have a lot of carbon buildup in the head, which is typically the case, especially with gas-powered units. You have a lot of carbon from the exhaust from the muffler. So you have to kind of chip it away maybe and clean up the carbon in the head to make it, for one, visible, but two, make it easier to remove the valve. Alright, here we have the clip removed. We're going to simply flip it over. Just kind of punch out the valve. There we are. We have the exhaust valve components. Came out pretty easily. And what you'll do here, you'll see the valve seat. Make sure there is no carbon buildup in the seat. Make sure it is as clean as possible, as clean as it can be, especially the seat where the actual valve will install. This is a valve seat. I want to make sure it's nice and flush, not any buildup, any carbon. So you can take valve grinding compound or just kind of like an emery cloth, and you can make sure it's nice and cleaned up. Just kind of sand it. Make sure it's nice and clean. All right. So what we're going to do is install the first part of the exhaust valve, which is of course the valve seat, like so. And we're going to take our spring, the thicker exhaust spring, just drop it in. And here's our valve restraint. We're going to go ahead and just install that. You'll notice obviously it kind of pushes up and down. You should get like a spring action there. And of course we're going to install the C-clip. Now the C-clip will basically fit into a small groove into the valve plate. There's a small groove cut out. You want to make sure it snaps into place. Make sure it snaps into that groove. You'll be able to actually see it. But if it's not snapped into the groove, the valves will come apart, it won't pressurize, and that'll be a problem. So just confirm if you installed it correctly. You can flip it over, and you see the valve seat there. Just push it up and down, and you'll notice kind of a valve action there. You'll notice the spring function. It'll just spring up and down, and you'll have more tension in this than you will from the intake valve because there's smaller springs. Now we're going to go ahead and flip it over. And we're going to take the intake valve out. You'll notice this valve plate is also nice and clean. It's already been buffed with Scotch-Brite. What you can use is kind of a die grinder with a Scotch-Brite pad and simply clean it up like the gasket material and the carbon with this. So this is done before, previously, just to show you how nice and clean it should be, and it should look just like this. All right, so we're going to take our C-clip tool, simply take the intake C-clip out, and that might happen. It might spring across the room or in your eye, so wear goggles ideally. That may very well happen. This is an old valve plate, so these have been stuck in here for a while, so you'll have that, tension. All right, so intake valve is out. Again, just like the exhaust valve, we make sure the valve seat is nice and clean, no carbon buildup. Simply drop the valve seat in. Then our thinner intake spring, and of course the valve seat. And make sure this doesn't come unsprung, because it is a thin spring, so that can't happen. So make sure it does. Make sure you push the valve seat in, the spring does not come unsprung. That can happen sometimes. It's a small spring. All right, going to hold it in place, and we're going to simply close that C-clip, and just like the exhaust valve, make sure it snaps into place. So you might need to wiggle it about and make sure it's nice and even. All right, and you usually hear a clicking sound like I just heard, a snap. That confirms it is actually in place. You flip it over, make sure it springs back and forth, and you'll notice less tension because it's an intake valve, thinner spring. And simply, repeat the process with the other side. You have another exhaust valve and another intake valve, same exact process. What you do now, when you put the valve plate back onto the cylinder, you want to make sure, obviously it goes back on like you took it off. Make sure the intake valves with the lighter springs are on the left side. So these are the intake valves. We have the thinner springs, so not as much tension. On the left side, we're going to lay that down. Well, of course, we're going to install our cylinder gasket. So what you can do is lay that down. You can use some Vaseline or petroleum jelly on the edges to make sure it seats so it doesn't move around when you install it. So we have our cylinder gasket down. We have our valve plate down. Everything's lined up. And of course, our head gasket we're going to install right here. You'll notice this little tab on the left side. Make sure it lines up with the tab on the valve plate you can see right here. So it obviously lines up. And of course, our head is nice and clean. Our valve plate's nice and clean. No gasket material, no buildup on the head or on the valve plate. And again, petroleum jelly applied on the edges just to keep it steady. All right, and of course our head. And remember, the intake side is going to go on the left side. So intake is on the left, just like we took it off. And it's simply a matter of bolting the head bolts down, and the head bolts should be torqued at 250 inch-pounds. So you want to start with the inside bolt and go outwards in an X pattern. So tighten in this fashion. And that's it. That's how to install a K-pump valve rebuild kit. If you do have any more questions, feel free to call in to a sales rep or contact the manufacturer for more information. And view our technical document online. Thank you very much for watching.